Hello?
Hey people, I'm Terry Bluez and I want to welcome you to Black Gift TV. Make sure you subscribe to the channel by clicking the icon below. Black Gift TV is your one-stop shop for colored content. It is the official channel for the Four Color Man podcast and the Dean's List streaming series. You also find music, stand-up comedy, and short film works. And if you like the content, make sure you visit www.blackgiftcreative.com, the official sponsor for the Four Color Man podcast merch. Now, let's start the show.
You are now about to witness the strength of street knowledge.
First of all, let's talk about the black church for a moment, because I know you're a very religious guy. Well, I won't stay on this subject long, right? But I do want to get your opinion on record on this, right? Mm-hmm. First of all, in previous generations, the black church was like the cornerstone of the community, right? Like they were the leaders of policy. Like when politicians wanted to get something done, they would go to the black church, right? Today, you see a lot of this generation moving away from that, right? The black church isn't necessarily the cornerstone of the community. And is that because of what the church has been doing? Because not only instances like this where the church betrays, the trust of family on some stuff like that happens, but more on a broader scope, like the sense of these mega churches and, pastors driving Bentleys and taking collections for their private jets. Like, you know what I mean? Like the corruption that goes on is the bigger issue, because do we no longer trust them? Like, you know what I mean? Like these are all bigger issues of trust with the church, or like too trusting of the church and being taken advantage of versus this generation sort of moving away from that.
Well, first of all, right, I think, okay, so if we go back to the black church, and some older person will say, no, that's you misspeaking, but when we think about the church being a religious and political haven, for African Americans. So, right, during slavery, that's all we had was the church.
Yeah.
Right? Or the church and that's the thing, we keep thinking about a building. The church was the gathering of the believers, right? And one place that we could gather freely, and obviously they're watching, we can't be too free, but the one place that we could gather freely, we could gather as churchgoers, and we could work. I mean, I think one of the most powerful, if you ever read Beloved or seen the film, and I think it's more powerful reading it than it is watching it in the film, but just, what is her name? Mama Suggs. The African-American female preacher during slavery, and these people coming to her because it was there that they could express themselves, and it was there that burden of, even though they had to go right back and be beaten and raped and working, but at least in that moment, man, that burden could be lifted off of me. Okay. So then we get into this whole idea of political nature of church. It's just like my wife's aunt, who passed away a few years ago. I think she was 95 or something. She was like, we always talk about revivals as these places where all we did was talk about the Bible. She said, that's not what we were doing in these revivals. Yeah, we did talk about the word of God, but we were actually talking about strategy. How do you own land? How do you build wealth in your community? Right? We're talking strategy, but we had to use religion as a guise, right? It was a disguise so that we would not be bothered when we were actually in there helping each other out financially, helping each other out, again, politically. Like we were trying to build our communities using God as sort of the cornerstone for that. But really, we were talking about like real strategy. Okay. Then we get into the 50s, 60s with MLK. And here we have our preacher who sort of, using the ideology of Gandhi, decides that he is going to bring this whole idea of nonviolence to us as a way to combat racism and segregation. And again, most of those things, those meetings were happening where? In churches. But he was then taking those strategies out into the streets. Now, I don't know where it happened. I don't know when it happened. But at some point, we lost the political nature, or we stopped mixing it, right? We got this whole idea that you can't talk about voting, or you shouldn't be talking about racism. And you right, this is a place where we need to be talking about the word, right? Only the word, right? And I am a believer in the word. I believe you need to be talking about the word. I believe you need to be praying to God. I believe that you need to have a relationship with God. I'm gonna talk about that in a minute. But when you lose the real world function, right, and you only talk about the spiritual being, you've lost something. Because now, in my mind, you've become irrelevant. Because I can come in here and get filled with the Holy Ghost all day long and go back home, rats, roaches, being broke, racist cops, potholes in the street. Because you've not taught me how to go down to City Hall. You've not pushed in me the idea of voting. You've not really instilled in me that being a homeowner and owning land and building wealth and having a college fund for my kids, you've not instilled any of those things into me and let me know that those are the things that are actually going to break me out of these chains physically, but also spiritually, because in some ways you want to fatten your pocket with my tithes and my offering. So then you lose that thing. And not only that, sadly, you become in cahoots with the enemy. And to come on Sundays and tell me that the person who is either funding, writing checks, or who you're friends with, like those black pastors who said with Trump, I could barely stomach watching that, but that's a whole nother. But when those types of people are the ones who are, allowing you to live a certain lifestyle, and continue to manipulate your congregants, then how dare you stand up and say anything against them, right? So that makes you become, in my opinion, ineffective. Because the more that people wake up and understand what you have been doing and that you have not been speaking, because I think of somebody like John Hagee, he has no problem. This is a white pastor in San Antonio who has no problem standing up and telling you that Clinton is the devil. He has no problem standing up and talking about how Bush was God's man on earth. I mean, no problem. So then as a black church, you should have no problem letting your congregants know that that's a crock of shit and that what he's saying is racist and that you should not be listening to that mess. And the way that you combat that is you get out there and you vote and you make sure that you have the ability to again, build wealth and that you have the ability to sort of have your own, right? But we're not doing that. So to the point of this, the question then becomes, well, what is the church's function today? Or what should the church's function be? And I think the church's function needs to be exactly what I just said, but I think a lot of churches are afraid because they feel like that type of rhetoric is divisive. They don't want to lose. We're now all into this thing of having diverse churches, which I think is great. But with diversity comes silence sometimes because now you can't speak freely. There's things that I can say to my wife in my bedroom that I'm not going to say when we at Thanksgiving dinner with other people.
Yeah.
So I think we have lost a haven where we can actually speak freely and talk about the issues that affect us because we want to be inclusive of everybody. And I think we should. And in my opinion, if we're going to really be inclusive of everybody and everybody say that they are a level of Christ and a level of God, I should be able to talk freely in front of my white brothers about how racist they are. Because we want to be corrected. No, I'm serious. We want to be corrected because sometimes people don't know they're being racist.
Yo.
They're being offensive. Sometimes they really don't. I mean, some people say that's not true. That it is true. Like sometimes we being racist.
Yes, I say that all the time. Like my biggest thing is there's a difference between ignorance and stupidity. Ignorance can be fixed. Stupidity is a choice. Like you don't know that that's racist. And I understand that living in Minnesota because white people are like taking classes on how not to be racist. Like
we got some of those here in Austin, which is interesting.
Yo, man, those things are. I sent you a couple of those message boards from my department. There is a social group on campus called I'm butchering the name, but it's like non-racist white people combating racism, and I'm like,
you can't combat racism without having black people involved because you don't even know that you're racist.
I'm like, yo, that shit was wild to me.
So wait a minute, you're not letting me finish. So
go ahead.
What I said is this idea of spirituality, right? Mm-hmm. With sort of speaking of sort of things that are happening politically in the world. Spirituality is something that actually is a very intimate, in my opinion, intimate and individual experience. Yes, we can come together, we can pray, we can do these things as a church body, but the cornerstone of all of that is your personal relationship. And I think that's something else that we've lost because we've equated having a personal relationship with God as what the church is doing. And so I think that, to be honest with you, we need to get back to finding the God in us.
Oh, yeah, most
And
definitely.
what that looks like for us, what that means for us. Yes, I think your pastor can sort of help you. I think that even if some people don't believe in going to church, and that's fine, whatever. But there's a way that you can be helped to do that. Maybe it's some spiritual advisor, whatever it may be. But you got to find the God in you. And I think we've lost the God in us because we're so greedy and we're just looking at other things at this point. And so now because of that, we've turned against the church. Just because of what I said, because the church has become ineffective because they're only dealing with one side. It's kind of like being in a relationship with my wife. There's two parts of that relationship, right? There's the emotional part and there's the physical part, right? Not to be graphic or anything, but it's like if one of those is not working, then we're going to have an issue.
Yeah, most definitely.
Because if I'm not satisfying her emotionally, then she doesn't want to, satisfy me physically, right? So anyways.
Oh, that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Vice versa, right? Because sometimes we act like, well, man, it don't matter. Well, it does matter. I want to be satisfied emotionally as well, and that makes me want to have a physical relationship with you.
Yeah.
And so I think we begin to feed only one side of ourselves. Right now, the political side of us, not realizing that we need both. The church at this point is feeding the spiritual side of us and not feeding sometimes the practical sides of us. And so we need both of those, I think, in order to function effectively in the world. And that's why the church, I think, for some people is not that place because they feel like the church has been silent on so many real things that are happening. There's like Michael Waters in Dallas, who I just adore because Michael's a good preacher. But even more so than being a good preacher, Michael's out there in the trenches. He don't mind our calling racism. He don't mind calling out, even if it's the mayor of Dallas or even if it's, city council members. He will call them out in a heartbeat. And I think that's what we need. Somebody who, again, can pray for me, can talk to me about the word, but who is also bold enough and out there enough to understand what's going on in the world. And that's what we've lost. And I think that's why the church is becoming effective. And I think that's why a lot of people have just decided to abandon it altogether. That was a long-winded answer.
Hello.